I am
I'm
247
here.
years old.
Hold on.
I have
It
killed
hurts so
63
much.
men in
I
battle.
know. Stay with
I
me.
have ruled 10,000 souls through plague, famine, and war. I have negotiated treaties with creatures older than mountains and survived betrayals that would have broken lesser kings. And I cannot get my 6-year-old daughter to eat breakfast. The morning light filtered through the stained glass windows of Shadowmere Castle, painting the stone floor in shades of crimson and gold. The air smelled of cold porridge and wood smoke from the dying fire. December 14th, 1885. The date burned in my mind like a brand. 6 months remained. 6 months to find a solution, or everything I had built would crumble. Winter sat at the table, small and pale, her dark hair falling across a face that looked too much like her mother's. The porridge in front of her had gone cold an hour ago, congealing into gray paste. She hadn't touched it, hadn't spoken, hadn't even looked at me. Her small hands lay motionless in her lap, fingers ice white in the morning chill. 4 years of silence. 4 years since Evangeline died. 4 years of watching my youngest daughter retreat further into a world I couldn't reach. I knelt beside her chair, careful to keep my movements slow, gentle. Winter startled easily these days, like a deer scenting wolves on the wind. Her eyes, when she finally raised them to mine, were the pale gray of winter dawn. Vampire eyes. My eyes. But the fear in them was purely human. "Just a few bites, little one," I said quietly. "For me." She turned her face away. Behind me, Cassandra made a sound of disgust. 11 years old and already carrying the weight of a woman 3 times her age. My eldest daughter stood by the kitchen door with her arms crossed, red eyes flashing in the morning light. "She's not going to eat, Father. She never does when you ask." Cassandra's voice was sharp as broken glass. "I can handle this. I've been handling everything for 4 years." The words landed like blows, because she was right. Cassandra had been mother, sister, and keeper of household peace since the day Evangeline died. She had taken on responsibilities that no child should bear, and she had done it without complaint, without asking for help, without showing weakness, until she started showing nothing at all. Felix, my 8-year-old son, looked up from his book with worried eyes. He was the peacekeeper, the gentle soul who tried to smooth every rough edge, fix every broken thing. Books floated in the air around him, a telltale sign of his agitation. When Felix got emotional, objects tended to drift. "Maybe Winter would eat if we made blood pudding instead," he offered hopefully. "Remember how Mama used to make it with cinnamon? I found the recipe in her cookbook. I could try." "Stop talking about her." Cassandra's voice cracked like a whip. "Just stop." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. I closed my eyes, breathed, tried to remember the last time this house had felt like a home instead of a mausoleum. The children were fracturing. Cassandra was angry. Felix was desperately cheerful. Winter was disappearing into silence. And I was failing them. A king who could not protect his own family had no business sitting on a throne. The thought must have shown on my face because Felix's books dropped to the floor with a clatter. Winter flinched. Cassandra's expression softened for just a moment before hardening again. "Father," she said quietly, "the council meeting, you'll be late." Of course, the council. I rose to my full height, every inch the vampire king they expected me to be. Cold, controlled, untouchable. I adjusted my coat, checked my reflection in the darkened window. The face that looked back was pale and angular, dark hair touched with premature silver at the temples. 247 years, and I had aged more in the last 4 than in the previous 2 centuries combined. Grief did that to a man, even an immortal one. "Minerva will be here within the hour," I told Cassandra. "She'll stay with you until I return. We don't need a keeper." My daughter's chin lifted in defiance. "I'm perfectly capable." "I know you are." The gentleness in my voice surprised us both. "But I need you to be 11 years old today. Just for today. Can you do that for me?" Something flickered in her eyes. Something young and lost and desperately wanting to believe me. But she was my daughter, stubborn as winter frost and twice as cold. She looked away instead of answering. I left before she could see the defeat on my face. The council chambers sat in the heart of Shadowmere's government quarter, a massive stone building that had stood for 300 years. Inside, 12 vampire elders waited in judgment. 12 ancient creatures who had forgotten what it meant to feel human warmth, human love, human grief. They sat in a semicircle on elevated seats looking down on me like gods from Mount Olympus. Elder Mordecai presided at the center, his white hair falling past his shoulders, his eyes black as pitch. 290 years old, and he had spent every one of them accumulating power. To his left sat Obsidian Voss, my uncle, my rival, my greatest threat. Obsidian looked younger than his 250 years, with silver hair that caught the torchlight and eyes the color of fresh blood. He wore elegance like armor, every gesture calculated, every word precise. Where I had inherited my father's brutal directness, Obsidian had perfected the art of the knife in the dark. He smiled when I entered. It didn't reach his eyes. "Nephew," he said warmly, as though we were meeting for tea instead of my potential execution. "So good of you to join us. I was beginning to worry you'd forgotten." I took my place in the center of the chamber and met Mordecai's gaze without flinching. 4 years, Theron. The elder's voice echoed off the stone walls. 4 years widowed. The covenant requires balance. An immortal king must have a mortal queen. You know this. Your father knew this. Every king before you has known this. I am aware of the law. My voice was steady, cold, showing nothing of the desperation clawing at my chest. Then you understand that time has run out. Mordecai leaned forward, his ancient face carved from cruelty and stone. You have until the summer solstice. 6 months. Marry a mortal woman of unblemished character, or abdicate the throne. 6 months. The same deadline I had been counting down for weeks. The same noose tightening around my neck. "And if I abdicate?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Obsidian spoke up, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. "Then the crown passes to the next rightful heir." He spread his hands in mock humility. "A burden I would bear reluctantly, of course. But our people needs strong leadership, stable leadership, not a king who hides in his castle drowning in memories of a dead wife." The insult was calculated, precise, designed to make me react. I gave him nothing. My father, Obsidian continued, addressing the council now, was supposed to inherit this throne. He was firstborn. He was trained from childhood for kingship. But Theron's father murdered him over a mortal woman, a human he couldn't have otherwise. The crown should have been mine by blood, by right, by justice. "Ancient history," I said flatly, "crimes committed a century before I was born are not my sins to answer for." "No," Obsidian agreed softly, "but the consequences are yours to bear nonetheless. Your father stole the crown through murder. You hold it through weakness. I will reclaim it through law." Mordecai raised a hand for silence. "Enough, the past is past. What matters is the covenant. Theron, you have 6 months to wed a mortal queen, or the crown passes to Obsidian by default. There will be no extensions, no exceptions. The law is absolute." I bowed my head, showing respect I didn't feel. "Understood, Elder." "Good." Mordecai's smile was thin and cruel. "I do hope you find someone suitable. It would be a shame to see House Nightshade fall after so many centuries." The dismissal was clear. I left the chamber with Obsidian's laughter following me like smoke. The truth was simple and damning. I had already found someone. 3 months ago, in a moment of desperation, I had written to a mail-order bride agency in Philadelphia. The letter had been clinical, precise, listing exactly what I needed. A woman of intelligence and character. Someone practical rather than romantic. A widow preferably, who understood grief and wouldn't expect love from a marriage of convenience. I had received 12 responses. I had chosen one. Rosalind Hartwell, 29 years old, widowed, former accountant. The letter she sent was neat and careful, the handwriting small and precise. She didn't promise to love me or care for my children. She didn't paint fantasies of domestic bliss. She simply stated her qualifications and asked for honest terms. Something about her directness appealed to me. Or perhaps I was simply desperate enough to grasp at any lifeline offered. The stagecoach was supposed to arrive at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I had planned to meet her in town to explain the situation before bringing her to the castle, to give her a choice, even if that choice was an illusion. But the coach was late. By 4 o'clock, I was pacing the castle walls, watching the northern road through the gathering dark. By 5, I had sent Felix to town to inquire. By 6, Minerva was wringing her hands in the doorway, her weathered face creased with worry. "Storm's coming in fast, Your Majesty," she said quietly. "If that coach got caught on Dutchman's Ridge—" She didn't finish the thought. She didn't have to. Dutchman's Ridge was a narrow mountain pass 12 miles north of Shadowmere, beautiful in summer, deadly in winter. If the coach had broken down there, if Rosalind was trapped in the storm— I was moving before I finished the thought. "Watch the children," I ordered Minerva. "I'll be back before dawn." "Your Majesty, you can't—" But I was already gone. The blizzard hit like a fist. Snow fell in sheets so thick I could barely see my horse's head. Wind howled through the mountain pass like a living thing, hungry and vicious. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in as many minutes. I pushed forward anyway. Vampires don't feel cold the way mortals do. Our bodies don't register temperature as pleasure or pain, merely as information. But even I could tell this storm was murderous. A human caught in this weather wouldn't last an hour. The scent hit me 2 miles into the pass. Blood. Fresh blood, still warm, cutting through the snow and wind like a beacon. My body reacted instinctively, fangs descending, eyes bleeding to red. 2 centuries of control, and still the hunger could catch me off guard. But underneath the blood was something else, something that made my skin crawl with wrongness. Other vampires. I urged my horse forward, following the scent of blood and death through the white. The remains of the stagecoach appeared like a ghost through the snow. Overturned. Broken. The driver's body lay twisted in the road throat, torn open eyes staring sightless at the sky. Encircling the wreckage like wolves were 3 rogue vampires. They looked up as I approached, eyes glowing red and the dark mouths stained with fresh blood. Young ones. Feral. The kind who gave our species a reputation for mindless savagery. Mine, the largest one, hissed, gesturing to something behind the coach. Found her first. I dismounted slowly, deliberately. Let them see the crown seal on my coat, the authority in every movement. This is Shadowmere territory. I am Theron Nightshade, your king. Stand down. They exchanged glances. Hungry, calculating, deciding whether 3 against 1 was good enough odds. It wasn't. I moved faster than mortal eyes could track, faster than even young vampires expected. The first one I grabbed by the throat, lifting him off his feet, letting him see his death in my eyes, before I snapped his neck and dropped him in the snow. The second lunged at me. I caught her mid-leap, broke her back across my knee, threw her aside like kindling. The third ran. Smart. I let him go. I had more important concerns. Behind the overturned coach, half buried in snow, lay a woman. She was small, maybe 5'4". Her dress was black wool, torn and bloodstained. Her dark auburn hair had come loose from its pins, freezing in the wind. She wasn't moving. I knelt beside her, checking for breath, for pulse, for any sign of life. Her skin was ice cold. Her lips were blue, but her heart was still beating, faint and thready, fighting against the cold. Bruises covered her throat, fingerprints clear as a signature. Someone had tried to strangle her. Recently. The marks were fresh, angry purple against pale skin. Her lower lip was split. Her left cheek showed the yellow-green fade of an older bruise. This woman had been hurt, badly, repeatedly, and she had survived anyway. I gathered her into my arms, wrapping my coat around her slight frame. She weighed almost nothing, like a bird, like something the wind could carry away. Hold on, I whispered, though she couldn't hear me. Just hold on. The ride back to Shadowmere was the longest 12 miles of my life. I carried her through the castle doors just before midnight. Minerva took one look at the woman in my arms and went pale. Sweet, merciful heaven, she breathed. What happened to her? Rogues attacked the coach. Driver's dead. She's hypothermic and injured. I moved toward the stairs. Prepare the blue room, hot water, blankets, whatever she needs, and send for Father Cornelius. The priest, Minerva's eyes widened. Is she dying? I don't know, but if she is, I want last rites available. I took her to the warmest guest room in the castle, the one with southern exposure and a fireplace that could heat a small army. Minerva had already laid out blankets and started a fire that roared like summer. Between us, we stripped the wet clothes from Rosalind's frozen body, wrapped her in wool and fur, tucked her close to the flames. Her skin was so cold it burned to touch. I sat beside the bed and waited. Hours passed. The fire crackled. Snow fell past the windows in endless sheets. Minerva came and went, bringing hot stones to warm the bed tea that went cold, and untouched, worried glances that I pretended not to see. Father Cornelius arrived near dawn, his half-vampire nature allowing him to walk freely between our world and the mortal one. He examined Rosalind with practiced hands, checking her breathing, her pulse, the extent of her injuries. She'll live, he said finally. The hypothermia isn't severe enough to cause permanent damage. The bruising will heal. But Theron, he turned to me with troubled eyes. Someone hurt this woman. Badly, and not just once. These are the marks of sustained abuse. I looked at the fingerprints on her throat and felt something ancient and violent stir in my chest. The part of me that had killed 63 men in battle. The part that remembered what it meant to be a monster. Who did this to her? I asked quietly. You'll have to ask her that yourself. Father Cornelius closed his medical bag. If she chooses to tell you, He left as the sun began to rise. I stayed, watching this stranger sleep. This woman I had chosen from a list like ordering supplies. This practical solution to my political problem. She looked nothing like Evangeline. Evangeline had been tall and golden, with laughter that filled rooms and warmth that could melt even my coldest moods. She had been sunshine and summer life and light. This woman was winter, pale and dark and silent, bruised and broken, but somehow still breathing. I wondered what kind of strength it took to survive whatever had left those marks. I wondered if she had any idea what she was walking into by coming here. I wondered if I should wake her and tell her to run while she still could. Instead, I sat in the chair by her bed and waited for her to open her eyes. She woke as the sun reached its peak. One moment unconscious, the next awake, eyes flying open with the startled panic of someone who had learned to expect danger in sleep. Her first movement was defensive hands coming up to protect her face, body curling inward. "You're safe," I said quickly, keeping my voice low and steady. "You're in Shadowmere Castle. I'm Theron Nightshade. I found you in the snow." She stared at me. Green eyes, I noticed, the color of river glass, sharp and wary, and taking in every detail of her surroundings with the precision of someone who had learned that survival meant paying attention. Her gaze moved from my face to the room, to the door, to the windows, cataloging exits, measuring distances. Then back to me. "The driver," she said. Her voice was rough, damaged, like she'd been screaming or choking. "Is he dead? I'm sorry." She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, they were dry, no tears. Just a kind of weary acceptance that spoke of too much loss, too many deaths, too many things she couldn't control. "The vampires," she said. Not a question, a statement. I went very still. "You saw them. 3 of them. Killed the driver. Came for me." She touched her throat, wincing at the pressure. "I ran. Didn't get far." "How much do you remember?" "Enough." She met my eyes directly, and I saw the intelligence there. The quick mind that had impressed me in her letters. "You fought them. Killed at least one. Carried me here." Her gaze sharpened. "You're very strong, very fast, and you're not breathing." The observation was delivered calmly, clinically, like she was noting the weather. I had planned to ease into this, to explain carefully, to give her time to adjust before revealing the full truth. But Rosalind Hartwell was clearly not a woman who needed or wanted gentle lies. "I'm a vampire," I said simply. "King of Shadowmere territory. You're in a castle full of my kind. The children I told you about in my letters are half vampire. This entire region is governed by covenant law, which means I rule both mortal and immortal subjects." I waited for the screaming, the panic, the desperate flight that would end with her throwing herself out a window or begging to leave. Instead, she said, "You didn't mention that in your letters." "No, why not?" "Because I needed you to get on the stagecoach. And I assumed if I led with, 'Hello, I'm a vampire king who needs a mortal wife for political reasons,' you would have declined the offer." The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. Sensible assumption. We looked at each other for a long moment. She should have been terrified. She should have been demanding escape protection, anything other than this strange calm. "May I ask you something?" she said finally. "Of course." "The bruises on my neck." She touched them again carefully. "Did you—" "No." The word came out harder than I intended. "The driver had similar injuries. The rogues like to play with their food before feeding. But I didn't touch you. I wouldn't." She studied my face with those sharp green eyes, reading truth or lies in whatever she found there. "All right," she said. "Just that. All right." Like she had decided to trust me, or at least pretend to. And that was the end of it. The bedroom door opened. Minerva bustled in, carrying a tray of food, then stopped dead when she saw Rosalind awake. "Oh, thank the saints," she breathed. "I was so worried." She set the tray down and moved to the bed, fussing with pillows and blankets like a mother hen. "How are you feeling, dear? Are you warm enough? Hungry? I've brought soup and bread. Nothing heavy, you understand, but you need to eat something." "Minerva," I said gently, "give her space to breathe." The old housekeeper stepped back, wringing her hands. "Of course, Your Majesty. Forgive me. It's just—" her voice dropped. "Those marks on her throat. What monster would do such a thing?" Rosalind's expression shuddered, walls going up behind her eyes faster than a portcullis dropping. "My brother-in-law," she said flatly. "Emmett Creed, after my husband died." The words fell into silence like stones into deep water. Minerva made a sound of pure rage. "He ought to be horsewhipped. No, that's too kind. He ought to be—" Minerva, I said again more firmly. Perhaps you could bring fresh tea. She looked between us, reading the tension, the need for privacy. Of course, I'll be just downstairs if you need anything. When she was gone, I turned back to Rosalind. She was staring at the fire, her face carefully blank. You don't have to tell me, I said quietly. It's your story, your pain. You don't owe me explanations. I came here to marry you. Her voice was as empty as her expression. You should know what you're getting. My husband, Virgil Creed, was a confidence man. He cheated people out of their savings and used our family name to do it. When he died drunk, fell down the stair, broke his neck, his brother Emmett took over the household, took the business, took me. She touched her throat again, an unconscious gesture. Emmett told everyone I had helped Virgil with the swindles. He forged documents proving it, had me arrested. I ran before they could take me to trial. She finally looked at me. There might be people looking for me, Mr. Nightshade. Federal marshals, bounty hunters. If that's a problem, it's not a problem, I said. And it's your majesty, not Mr. Nightshade. Though you may call me Theron, if you prefer. Theron? She tested the name like a foreign word. Greek means hunter. My father had pretensions. Another almost smile. And Rosalind means gentle horse. My mother had hopes. We sat in silence for a moment, two strangers bound by necessity and circumstance, neither of us knowing quite what to say. I should tell you about the offer, I said finally. The real one, not the sanitized version I put in the letter. Please, my sovereign. I stood and moved to the window, looking out over the snow-covered valley. My kingdom, my prison. Vampire law requires balance. An immortal king must have a mortal queen. It's called the Covenant, and it's been in place for 1,000 years. My wife died 4 years ago. I have 6 months to remarry, or I lose the throne. To whom? Well, my uncle, Obsidian Voss. I searched for words. Complicated. His father was supposed to inherit the crown. My father killed him to prevent it. Obsidian has spent 200 years planning revenge. And you think he'll be a worse king than you? It wasn't a question. I know he will be. He's cruel, corrupt. He sees mortals as food and resources, nothing more. If he takes the throne, this territory will become a nightmare. Rosalind was quiet, processing. So you need a wife, any wife, as long as she's human and technically married to you. Yes. And in exchange, a room with a lock, wages, protection, 2 months to decide if you want to stay. If you don't, I'll pay your passage anywhere safe. I turned to face her. I won't force you, Rosalind. I won't lie to you. I won't pretend this is a love match or anything other than what it is, a business arrangement. But I will keep you safe. That I can promise. She looked at me for a long time. I could see her mind working, weighing options, calculating odds. This was a woman who had survived an abusive marriage and a murderous brother-in-law. She wasn't going to make decisions based on emotion or hope. I need to see the children, she said finally. Before I decide anything, I need to meet them. Of course. And your financial records. If I'm going to be queen even on paper, I want to know the state of the kingdom. I blinked. My what? Your books, ledgers, tax records, income and expenses. She sat up straighter, wincing slightly. I was an accountant, remember? It's what I do. And if someone's trying to take your crown, they're probably doing it through money as much as politics. The idea had never occurred to me. You want to audit my kingdom. I want to understand it. There's a difference, Reheneo. She pulled the blankets closer. In my experience, the truth is always in the numbers. People lie. Documents don't. At least not well. I found myself almost smiling. You're an unusual woman, Rosalind Hartwell. I'm a survivor, Your Majesty. There's a difference. The children met her that afternoon. I had warned them, of course. Explained that a guest was recovering from the attack. That she might stay. That they should be polite and not ask intrusive questions about her injuries. Felix absorbed this with wide-eyed fascination. Cassandra with cold suspicion. Winter with silence. We gathered in the formal sitting room, the one with afternoon light and comfortable chairs. Rosalind wore one of Minerva's dresses, plain gray wool, that hung loose on her slight frame. The bruises on her throat were darkening to purple. She moved carefully like someone whose body hurt, but refused to show it. Felix was the first to approach, bouncing on his toes with barely contained energy. Books floated around his head like planets orbiting the sun. You're the lady from Philadelphia. I looked it up in Father's atlas. It's 842 miles from here. That's a very long way. Did you ride the train? I've never been on a train. Father says maybe when I'm older. Do you like trains? I think they're fascinating. All that steam and engineering. There's a book about locomotives in the library. I could show you if you want. Do you like books? What's your name, father, said Rosalind. But that's very formal. Can I call you Rose? My name is Felix. I'm 8. I can make things float, but only small things. Watch. A teacup lifted off the side table and drifted toward her. Felix, I said quietly. Breathe. He blushed and the teacup dropped. Rosalind caught it before it hit the floor, her reflexes quick as a cat's. She set it down carefully and smiled at my son. Hello, Felix. Yes, you may call me Rose. And I would very much like to see that book about locomotives. Felix beamed like she had given him the sun. Cassandra stood by the fireplace with her arms crossed, her expression carefully neutral. She looked so much like Evangeline it hurt. Same bone structure, same stubborn chin, same way of holding herself when she wanted to appear stronger than she felt. You don't have to pretend, my daughter said flatly. We know why you're here. Father needs a wife to keep his crown. You need money and protection. It's a transaction. We're not children. You don't have to act like you care. The words were meant to hurt, to push away before she could be left again. Rosalind looked at my daughter for a long moment. Then she said, You're right. I don't know you. I don't know what you like or what makes you laugh or what scares you at night. I can't replace your mother. I wouldn't try. But I can promise you this, I don't make promises I can't keep. And I don't lie to children. Everyone lies, Cassandra shot back. Not everyone. Not about the things that matter. Rosalind's voice was gentle but firm. Your father told me about your mother, about how much you loved her, about how much you miss her. That loss is yours to keep. I'm not here to take it away or tell you to move on or any of the useless things people say when they don't know what else to do. Cassandra's mask cracked, just slightly, just enough. Then why are you here? Because I was drowning and your father offered me a lifeline. Because I have skills that might be useful and nowhere else to use them. Because running gets tiring after a while. She looked at me, then back at Cassandra. And because maybe if I stay, I can help. Not as a replacement, just as someone who knows what it's like to lose everything and keep going anyway. My daughter stared at her. For a moment, I thought she might cry, might break down the walls she had spent 4 years building, might let herself be 11 years old and scared and grieving instead of strong and angry and alone. Instead, she turned on her heel and left the room. The door closed with careful precision. Not a slam. That would have shown too much emotion. Felix looked stricken. I'm sorry, she's not always like this. She's just protecting herself, Rosalind finished quietly. I understand. Winter had been sitting in the corner the entire time so still I had almost forgotten she was there. She watched Rosalind with those huge gray eyes, taking in every word, every gesture, every breath. Rosalind noticed her now, turned slowly carefully like approaching a wild thing. Hello, she said softly. You must be Winter. My daughter didn't respond, didn't move, just watched with that unnerving intensity that made visitors uncomfortable. Rosalind didn't push, didn't try to force a connection. She simply reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. A rag doll, worn and faded, missing one button eye. I found this in the wreckage of the coach, she said. I thought perhaps it might belong to you. Winter's eyes widened. She looked at me, then back at Rosalind. Slowly, so slowly, she stood and crossed the room. Her small hand reached out, took the doll, pressed it to her chest. For the first time in 4 years, my youngest daughter's face showed something other than fear. She didn't speak, but she didn't run away either. Rosalind smiled. I'm glad she found her way back to you. Winter looked up at her. Then in a gesture that made my breath catch, she reached out and touched Rosalind's hand. Just for a moment. Just long enough to say thank you in the only language she had left. Then she disappeared back to her corner, clutching the doll like a lifeline. That evening, I found Rosalind in my study, surrounded by 5 years' worth of financial records. She had reorganized my entire office. Papers that had lived in chaotic piles now sat in neat stacks, organized by year and type. Ledgers lay open across the desk, covered in her small, precise handwriting. She had created a system of colored tabs and cross-references that made my head hurt to look at. You've been busy, I observed. She didn't look up from the invoice she was examining. These numbers are wrong. I beg your pardon. The blood tax records from the northern villages. Someone's been overcharging significantly. She held up the document. Look, 4 years ago, the annual tax for Millbrook was 600 sovereigns. Last year, it was 2,400. But the population hasn't increased. Production hasn't increased. Nothing justifies this spike except systematic theft. I moved closer, looking over her shoulder. She was right. The numbers didn't make sense. Show me. She did. Page after page of inflated taxes, padded invoices, mysterious fees that appeared and disappeared without explanation. A pattern of systematic theft that had been happening for years, right under my nose. How long has this been going on? I asked. At least 4 years, since right after... She stopped. Since right after Evangeline died. Rosalind nodded. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. No, you're right, that's when it started. I sank into the chair across from her. I was grieving, not paying attention. Someone took advantage. Do you know who? I thought about the council meeting, about Obsidian's smile, about the territories he had been collecting one by one through mysterious foreclosures and convenient bankruptcies. I have suspicions. Then we need proof. She turned back to the ledgers. Real proof, documentation, a trail we can follow to its source. Why are you doing this? I asked quietly. You've been here less than a day. You don't owe me anything. You could walk away. She finally looked up. Her green eyes met mine, and I saw something in them I recognized. The same thing I saw in the mirror every morning. Determination, stubborn, relentless determination to survive no matter what. I ran from Philadelphia with 11 cents and a wanted poster with my face on it, she said. I have nowhere else to go. No family left who would claim me. No future except what I build myself. So I might as well build it here. At least your monsters are honest about being monsters. We're not all monsters. No, a slight smile. Some of you are just very complicated men who happen to drink blood. Despite everything, I laughed. Fair assessment. She returned to her work. I watched her for a moment, this strange woman who had walked into my life through a blizzard and immediately started reorganizing my kingdom. Rosalind, thank you for what you said to Cassandra about not replacing Evangeline. Her hand stilled on the papers. I meant it. I'm not here to be anyone's mother. I'm not qualified for that role. You returned Winter's doll. Common decency, nothing more. Winter hasn't let anyone touch her in 4 years, and she let you. Rosalind looked up, surprised. You didn't notice? She paused. I thought she was just being polite. Winter doesn't do polite. Winter does silence and distance and fear. What she doesn't do is reach out and touch strangers. I leaned forward. Whatever you did, however you did it, you got through to my daughter in 5 minutes. That matters. She was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this. I'll stay, she said finally, for the 2-month trial. I'll help you with the investigation. I'll try not to make things worse with the children, and we can see where it leads. No promises. No promises, she agreed. I held out my hand. She took it. Her skin was warm against my cold palm. Living warmth. Human warmth. Something I had forgotten I missed. Welcome to Shadowmere, Rosalind Hartwell. Thank you, Your Majesty. We shook on it, a bargain sealed. A partnership formed from necessity and desperation and the faint, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, we could survive what was coming. In the corner of the study, hidden behind rows of old law books, a journal waited to be discovered. Evangeline's journal. The one she had kept hidden in the months before her death. The one that held secrets neither of us was ready to learn. But that revelation would come soon enough. For now, we had work to do, and 6 months to save a kingdom. By the 3rd week in Shadowmere, I had learned 3 things about Rose Hartwell. First, she reorganized chaos the way other people breathed. Every morning I found my study transformed papers, categorized ledgers, cross-referenced evidence, mounting in neat, damning stacks. She worked with the precision of a surgeon and the relentlessness of Winter. Second, she had won Felix's eternal devotion. My son followed her everywhere, chattering about locomotives and asking her to explain mathematics that made my head spin. She never showed impatience, never dismissed his questions, just answered with the same careful attention she gave my kingdom's finances. Third, she was thawing Cassandra, slowly, grudgingly. My eldest daughter still bristled at Rose's presence, still watched her with suspicious eyes. But the walls were developing cracks. Small things. Cassandra accepting help with mending without argument, asking Rose's opinion on a book, sitting at dinner without finding an excuse to leave early. In Winter. Winter watched from doorways, silent but present, clutching that rag doll like an anchor. 3 weeks of forgetting, sometimes for hours at a time, that this was supposed to be a business arrangement. The villages needed me. That became clear the moment Rose finished her audit and laid the evidence across my desk like weapons in an armory. Maps marked with red pins showing territories bleeding money. ledgers documenting a systematic theft so elaborate it could only have been orchestrated by someone with intimate knowledge of how kingdoms fell. "You need to see this yourself," she said one morning, her finger tracing a route through the northern settlements. "Numbers on paper are one thing, watching people starve is another. If you're going to fight Obsidian, you need to understand what he's done. Really understand it." She was right. I had been a king in name only for 4 years, hiding in my castle, drowning in memories, letting the world outside my grief continue without me. That ended today. We rode out at dawn, just the two of us. Rose sat her horse with surprising grace for a city woman, her dark cloak snapping in the winter wind. The bruises on her throat had faded to yellow shadows. She looked stronger now, less like something about to break, more like steel wrapped in silk. The first village was Millbrook, population 327, mostly human farmers who grew wheat and raised cattle to supply Shadowmere's markets. They had been loyal to House Nightshade for 6 generations. They should have been prosperous. Instead, I found decay, houses with roofs caving in, children too thin wearing clothes that had been patched and repatched until more thread than fabric remained, fields lying fallow because farmers couldn't afford seed. The village elder, a man named Thomas Brennan, who I remembered as robust and laughing now, looked like a scarecrow dressed in human skin. "Your Majesty," he bowed, and the gesture looked painful. "We weren't expecting. I should have come sooner." The words tasted like ash. "Tell me what's happened here." Thomas exchanged glances with the other villagers who had gathered. Fear in their eyes, not of me, of speaking truth to power. Rose dismounted and moved to stand beside me. Small gesture, powerful message. Whatever they said, she would hear it too. Witness it, remember it. "The taxes, sire." Thomas's voice was barely a whisper. "They've been rising, each year worse than the last. We can barely feed our families." I looked at Rose. She nodded, understanding what I needed. "How much are you paying now?" she asked gently. 2,400 sovereigns last year, my lady. Collector Voss took our surplus grain when we couldn't pay in full. We barely had enough left for winter." Rose's mouth tightened into a thin line, the exact number she had found in the ledgers. "Did Collector Voss give you receipts?" she continued. "Documentation of what was taken." "He did, my lady." Thomas produced a crumpled paper from his coat. "But when we tried to contest the amount with the council, they said the records matched, that we were complaining without cause." Rose took the receipt, read it. Her fingers tightened on the paper. "This has been altered," she said quietly. "See here, the ink color changes. Someone added a digit after the original was written." I took the paper from her. She was right. The forgery was subtle but visible once you knew to look for it. "How many villages has this happened to?" I asked. Thomas looked at his neighbors. "All of them, sire. Every settlement in the northern territories. And when we can't pay, a collector boss takes what he wants." My uncle hadn't just been embezzling. He'd been systematically destroying the economic foundation of my kingdom, starving my people, breaking their spirits, all while I sat in my castle mourning a wife I couldn't save. "This ends now," I said, my voice carried across the village square. "I'm calling a council session. Collector Voss will answer for this. You have my word." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Your Majesty. We thought—" He stopped, swallowed. "We thought you didn't care anymore. After the Queen died." The words hit like a fist to the chest. Because he was right. I hadn't cared. Not about them, not about the kingdom, not about anything except the hollow space where Evangeline used to be. Rose's hand found mine. Just for a moment. Just long enough to ground me before I drowned in shame. "He cares now," she said firmly. "And he's going to make this right." We visited 6 more villages that day. The story was the same everywhere. Inflated taxes, falsified records, families choosing between heating their homes and feeding their children. Old people dying because they couldn't afford medicine. Young people fleeing to cities where opportunities existed and vampire kings didn't bleed them dry. By the time we returned to Shadowmere, I was shaking with rage I hadn't felt in decades. Rose led me to the study without a word, poured 2 glasses of whiskey that I kept for mortal guests, handed me one. "Drink," she ordered. I obeyed. The burn was nothing compared to the fury in my blood. "You couldn't have known," she said quietly. "You were grieving. People took advantage. That's on them, not you." "I'm the king." The glass cracked in my hand. "It's my job to know, to protect them. I failed. Yes. No sugarcoating, no gentle lies. You did fail them. For 4 years, you let your grief matter more than their survival. That's unforgivable. I looked at her, this woman who had been beaten and betrayed and hunted, who still somehow found the strength to speak hard truths. But she continued, setting down her own glass. You're here now. You're seeing it. You're choosing to fight. That counts for something, not enough to erase 4 years of neglect, but enough to start making it right. How? The word came out broken. How do I make this right when Obsidian has the council in his pocket? You get proof they can't ignore. You expose the pattern. She pulled out her organized stacks of evidence. I've documented everything. Receipts from 12 villages. Comparative analysis showing the forgeries. It's thorough, Theron. Even the council can't dismiss this. I wanted to believe her, but I knew my uncle better than she did. Knew how he operated in shadows and suggestions. Knew how he turned truth into doubt and doubt into dismissal. He'll find a way around it, I said. He always does. Then we find harder evidence. Rose's eyes gleamed with fierce intelligence. Every criminal keeps records. The real ones. We just need to find where he's hidden his. The woman was brilliant and possibly insane. I loved both qualities equally. The council session convened 3 days later. I stood in the center of that ancient chamber with Rose at my side and evidence stacked on the table between us. 12 vampire elders looked down from their elevated seats like gods preparing to pass judgment. Elder Mordecai presided with his usual cold disdain. You've called an emergency session, Theron. This had better be worth interrupting the winter recess. It is. I kept my voice level, controlled. I'm here to present evidence of systematic fraud by Collector Obsidian Voss. Silence. Then murmuring. Eyes cutting to Obsidian, who sat in his usual place, looking mildly amused. Strong accusations, nephew, he said smoothly. I hope you have more than hurt feelings to support them. I have receipts, testimony, financial analysis. I nodded to Rose. My consort has prepared a full accounting. Rose stepped forward. If she was nervous standing before 12 ancient vampires who could kill her with a thought, she didn't show it. She laid out her evidence with the precision of a surgeon, making incisions, tax records from 12 villages, original receipts showing amounts paid, falsified documents showing amounts recorded, comparative analysis proving the discrepancies, witness statements from village elders. It was devastating. It should have been enough. Elder Mordecai examined the documents with growing interest. Other council members leaned forward, whispering among themselves. I allowed myself a moment of hope. Then Obsidian spoke. Impressive work, Miss Hartwell. His voice dripped with false admiration. You've clearly spent considerable time on this investigation. But I'm afraid there's a simpler explanation than conspiracy. He stood and moved to the evidence table with languid grace, picked up one of the receipts, held it to the light. These villages have been underreporting their production for years, hiding surplus to avoid taxation. I've merely been correcting their accounting errors. He smiled at the council. The amounts they actually owe would bankrupt most of them. That's a lie, I said flatly. Is it? Obsidian pulled out his own ledger. Thick, leather-bound, official-looking. I have documentation here showing actual harvest yields versus reported yields. The discrepancy is substantial. He was good, better than good. He had anticipated this move and prepared a counter-narrative that turned the victims into criminals. Let me see that ledger, Rose demanded. Obsidian handed it to her with a courteous bow. Of course, I have nothing to hide. She examined it. Page after page of harvest records, production estimates, population counts, all supporting Obsidian's version of events. All meticulously documented. All completely fabricated. I could see the truth in the set of Rose's shoulders, the way her fingers tightened on the pages. She knew these numbers were false, but proving it would require access to historical records we didn't have. This is impressive fiction, she said quietly, but it's still fiction. Prove it. Obsidian's smile widened. I've shown my documentation. You've shown yours. The council must decide which set of records is more credible. Elder Mordecai leaned back in his seat. The council will need time to review both sets of evidence. We'll reconvene in 1 week to render judgment. 1 week. 7 days for Obsidian to cover his tracks, to intimidate witnesses, to shore up his lies with more lies. We were losing. Then the chamber doors opened. A figure stepped inside, wrapped in a traveling cloak dusted with snow. He threw back his hood, revealing a face I hadn't seen in months. Gray hair, hard eyes, the badge of a federal marshal pinned to his coat, and beside him, smiling like a wolf, stood Emmett Creed. Forgive the interruption, honored council. Emmett's voice was smooth as oil. But I bring information relevant to these proceedings. Every instinct I had screamed danger. Rose had gone very still beside me, the kind of stillness prey animals achieve when predators draw near. This is a closed session, Mordecai said irritably. State your business quickly or leave. My business concerns the character of Miss Rosalind Hartwell. Emmett pulled a document from his coat. I am her brother-in-law, and I hold a federal warrant for her arrest on charges of fraud and conspiracy. The air went out of the room. Rose didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared at the man who had strangled her and forged evidence against her and driven her across a continent to escape. How convenient, Obsidian murmured. An investigation into my conduct led by a wanted criminal. I wonder what else Miss Hartwell has been dishonest about. She's been dishonest about nothing. My voice cut through the whispers like a blade. Emmett Creed is a liar and an abuser. He strangled this woman, beat her, forged documents to frame her for his brother's crimes. Slander, Emmett said calmly. I have witnesses who will testify to her involvement in my brother Virgil's schemes. I have her signature on fraudulent contracts. Forgeries. Rose's voice was quiet but steady, just like everything else about you. You specialize in making lies look like truth. Prove it, Emmett challenged. I have federal documentation. You have accusations. The same trap, the same impossible demand for proof we couldn't produce. I looked at Rose, saw the fear behind her eyes, the calculation, the awful knowledge that she was cornered again, that running had only delayed the inevitable. I'll leave, she said quietly. Your Majesty, I'll go with them. You don't need to lose your throne because of me. No. The word came out harder than I intended, louder, echoing off stone walls and ancient ceilings. No, I repeated. I've lost too much already. I won't lose you. Rose's eyes widened. Theron, Rose Hartwell is under my protection. I turned to face the council. Let them see the king I used to be. Before grief, before weakness. She is my consort, my partner. Anyone who touches her answers to me. She's a criminal, Emmett said. She's under my protection. I bared fangs. Let them see the monster underneath the civilized veneer. And you're trespassing in my territory. That gives me every right to throw you out. Violently. The marshal shifted uncomfortably. He was mortal. Smart enough to know when he was outmatched. But Emmett was either braver or more foolish. You can't protect her forever. Watch me. I looked at Rose, saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Not fear, not calculation, something warmer, fiercer. She stays. The investigation continues. And in 1 week, this council will decide the truth. Obsidian's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. 1 week, then. He bowed mockingly. I look forward to proving my innocence. He left with Emmett in tow. The council dispersed. The marshal looked between us, clearly calculating whether arresting a vampire king's consort was worth the political nightmare it would create. He left without another word. Rose and I stood alone in the empty chamber. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Yes, I did. Theron Azra, no. I turned to face her. Listen to me, I've spent 4 years being afraid. Afraid of feeling, afraid of losing. But you know what I realized today? She shook her head. Not caring hurts worse. Watching those villages starve while I hid. Watching my children fracture. Watching you prepare to sacrifice yourself. I took her hands. They were warm and alive and real. I'm done being afraid. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Agreed. Rose looked at me for a long moment. Then she smiled, small and real and breaking through like sun after storm. Agreed. The blizzard came that night. Not weather. Worse. I was in the study with Rose going over evidence for the 100th time when Cassandra burst through the door. Father, my daughter's voice cracked. It's Winter. Something's wrong. I was moving before she finished speaking. Winter lay in her bed, small body convulsing with fever that had come on like a lightning strike. Her skin burned hot enough to blister. Her eyes rolled back, showing only whites. And from her mouth came sounds no 6-year-old should make. Growling, hissing, the wet snarl of a predator. How long? I demanded. 10 minutes. Cassandra was crying, but she was fine at dinner. Then she started screaming. We couldn't wake her. Father, what's happening? I knew. God help me, I knew. Transition crisis, I said. Her vampire half is trying to take over, forcing full transformation. But she's only 6. Rose appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with quick eyes. That's too young. It would kill her. Yes, the word hung in the air like a death sentence. I had seen this once before. A half-vampire child attempting transition before puberty. The human body couldn't handle the change, couldn't survive the transformation. The child had died screaming while we watched helplessly. I would not watch my daughter die. There has to be something we can do. Rose moved to the bed, put her hand on Winter's burning forehead. Medicine? Magic. Something. There's one cure. Father Cornelius appeared in the doorway like he'd been summoned. Maybe he had. Half-vampires had instincts about these things. Null blood transfusion. The unique properties can stabilize a half-vampire in crisis, reset the transformation. Where do we find null blood? I asked desperately. Father Cornelius looked at Rose, then at me, then back at Rose. You already found her, he said quietly. The world tilted. What? Rose's voice was barely a whisper. Your null blood child, rare as diamonds, blood that can't be turned, can't be corrupted, can stabilize the unstable. He moved to check Winter's pulse. It's why the rogues couldn't turn you during the attack. You're immune. Rose stared at him. That's why Obsidian wants me dead. Most likely. There's a prophecy. Old. Says a null blood queen will end certain bloodlines' hold on power. Father Cornelius looked at me. She's the only chance, but the process is dangerous. Vampire feeding on null blood is agonizing for the donor, like liquid fire in the veins. Some don't survive it. I looked at my daughter, convulsing, dying, then at Rose, standing straight despite the fear in her eyes. No, I said, I can't ask that of you. I won't. You're not asking. Rose was already rolling up her sleeve. I'm offering. Rose. I walked 12 miles through a blizzard to get here. Her voice was steady, certain. I survived a husband who beat me and a brother-in-law who tried to kill me. I can survive this too. You don't understand. I grabbed her shoulders. The pain is worse than anything you've experienced. And if something goes wrong, then we'll deal with it. But if we don't try, Winter dies. And I didn't come all this way to watch another child lose their mother. She looked at Winter, then back at me. Let me save her, Theron, please. In her eyes, I saw something that made my ancient heart crack open. Not just courage, love. This woman who owed us nothing, who had been here 3 weeks, who had every reason to run. She loved my daughter enough to risk death for her. All right, I whispered, but I'm staying with you, every second. I wouldn't have it any other way. She settled beside Winter's bed, offered her wrist. Tell me what to do. Father Cornelius prepared the ritual with practiced efficiency. Herbs to ease pain that wouldn't be eased. Prayers to gods who probably weren't listening. Winter positioned carefully in Rose's lap. When she starts feeding, don't pull away, he instructed. The transfusion needs to complete. Can you do that? Rose nodded. I knelt beside them, took Rose's free hand in mine. Let her know I was there, would stay there, no matter what came next. Winter's eyes opened, red, feral, vampire. Her fangs descended, and she bit. Rose screamed. The sound tore through me like shrapnel. I held her tighter as her body arched in agony. As whatever was happening inside her veins played out in expressions of pain too terrible to witness. Winter drank, small throat working, tiny hands clutching Rose's arm like a lifeline. And Rose held her, through the fire, through the agony, through pain that would have made grown men beg for death. She held my daughter and she didn't let go. I watched her face, memorized every line of suffering, promised myself that if she survived this, I would spend the rest of my existence making sure she never regretted it. Almost there, Father Cornelius murmured. Just a little more. Rose's eyes rolled back. Her breathing stuttered. For one terrible moment, I thought we'd lost her. Then Winter released her, fell back against the pillows with a sigh that sounded almost peaceful. The fever was gone. Her skin cooled to normal temperature. Her breathing evened out. Color returned to cheeks that had been chalk white moments before, and Rose collapsed in my arms. I held her while she shook, while aftershocks of pain rolled through her body, while she gasped for air like drowning. You're all right, I whispered against her hair. You're safe. You did it. She's going to be all right. Rose's fingers dug into my coat, holding on, anchoring herself. Is Winter alive, healing, because of you? Cassandra was crying. Felix was crying. Even Father Cornelius looked suspiciously bright-eyed. And Winter. Winter opened her eyes. Gray eyes, human eyes, She looked at Rose with something like wonder. You stayed, she whispered. First words in 4 years, spoken not to me, not to Cassandra, to the woman who had just bled herself half to death to save a child she barely knew. Mama left. Winter's voice was rusty from disuse, small and broken and devastating. She went away and didn't come back. But you stayed, even when it hurt. You stayed. Rose reached out with trembling fingers, touched Winter's cheek. I will always stay, she said. I promise. Winter grabbed her hand, held tight, and for the first time since Evangeline died, my youngest daughter cried. Real tears, healing tears, the kind that wash away old pain and make room for new hope. I gathered them both close, Rose and Winter. Then Cassandra and Felix joined until we were all tangled together in a heap of exhausted relief. My family, broken and strange and held together by a woman who had walked out of a blizzard and into our lives like an answer to a prayer I hadn't known I was praying. Father, Winter said, still holding Rose's hand, the bad dreams, the ones I've been having since Mama died. I saw them again tonight, while I was sick. You don't have to talk about them, I said gently, but I do. She looked at me with eyes older than 6 years. Because Mama told me to. In the dreams, she said I needed to tell you what I saw, before it's too late. What did you see, little one? The dark man, the one who hurt Mama. Winter's voice was steady, certain. The man with Uncle's eyes. My blood went cold. Obsidian. Winter nodded. I saw him, the night Mama died. I was supposed to be sleeping, but I heard noises. I followed, and I saw him. He hurt her, bit her, drank and drank until she stopped moving. Then he threw her away like garbage. The room went silent. 4 years. 4 years of not knowing, of investigating, of suspecting everyone and no one. 4 years of Obsidian sitting across from me at council meetings, offering condolences, helping plan memorials for the wife he murdered. Why didn't you tell me? My voice cracked. Sweetheart, why didn't you say anything? I tried. Tears streamed down Winter's face. But every time I opened my mouth, the words wouldn't come. Like something was stuck. Like speaking would make it real. So I stopped trying. I stopped talking. I thought if I never said it out loud, maybe it would go away. Trauma. Deep, soul-crushing trauma that had stolen my daughter's voice for 4 years. Rose held Winter closer. You're so brave, she whispered. So impossibly brave. And now you've told us. Now we know. Now we can do something about it. I looked at Father Cornelius. He nodded grimly. Vampire compulsion, he said, subtle, planted during the feeding, making the child unable to speak about what she witnessed. Obsidian covered his tracks thoroughly. Obsidian, my uncle, my blood, the man who had killed Evangeline not out of passion or accident, but as part of a calculated plan to take my throne. Something inside me transformed. I had been surviving, existing, moving through the world like a ghost, no more. Rose, I stood, helped her to her feet. I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to figure out where Obsidian keeps his real ledger, the one with all his actual crimes recorded, because we're not waiting for the council to decide. We're not playing by his rules anymore. You're going to break into his estate. Yes. And steal his evidence? Yes, Rose smiled. When do we leave? You think I'm letting you do this alone? She touched my face. You just publicly declared me your consort, protected me from Emmett, held me through the worst pain of my life. We're in this together, Theron. All of it. I kissed her. Couldn't help it. Couldn't stop it. Just pulled her close and pressed my mouth to hers and tasted courage and stubbornness and something that felt dangerously like love. When we broke apart, she was smiling. So that's a yes to the breaking and entering, she asked. That's a yes to everything. We spent 2 days planning. Rose used every resource at her disposal. Old property records showing the layout of Obsidian's manor, servant schedules, guard rotations, the movements of a man who thought himself untouchable. He's meticulous, she said, marking routes on a hand-drawn map. Everything documented, everything controlled, which means the ledger will be somewhere secure but accessible. His studied, I said, is second floor, south wing. He has a safe hidden behind a portrait of our grandfather. How do you know? Because I have the same safe, in the same location. Family tradition. Rose laughed despite everything. Vampires in your dramatic flair. The night we chose was moonless, dark as pitch, perfect for monsters to move unseen. I left Minerva in charge of the children with strict instructions to bar all doors and let no one inside until we returned. Cassandra hugged me fiercely before we left. Felix made me promise to come back. Winter pressed her rag doll into my hands. "For luck," she whispered. "Mama always said dolls keep the bad dreams away." I tucked it inside my coat, over my heart. Then Rose and I rode into the dark. Obsidian's manor sat on the eastern edge of Shadowmere, a sprawling estate that had belonged to his father before him. Beautiful in daylight, sinister at night, we approached from the back through gardens gone wild with winter. "Remember," Rose whispered, "I'll keep watch. You get the ledger, in and out." Agreed. I moved like smoke, silent, invisible. 200 years of practice made infiltration second nature. The window to Obsidian's study was unlocked. Arrogant, or a trap. I slipped inside. The room was exactly as I remembered. Dark wood, leather chairs, the portrait of our grandfather glaring down from above the fireplace. I moved to it, found the hidden latch, swung the painting aside. The safe sat revealed. Combination lock. I could crack it given time. I didn't have time. "Hello, nephew." The lights blazed on. Obsidian stood in the doorway, smiling, like he'd been waiting for this moment his entire life. "I was wondering when you'd come," he said. "Took you longer than expected." Grief really did make you slow. I turned to face him, dropped any pretense of civility. "You killed Evangeline." "I did." No denial, no shame. "Beautiful woman, but necessary." "Why, because your father killed mine over a mortal woman 100 years ago. Because House Voss was supposed to rule. Because everything you have should have been mine." He moved closer. "I've spent a century planning this. Building power. Waiting for the perfect moment to take everything from you the way it was taken from me. So you murdered my wife, traumatized my daughter, starved my people. Rage turned my vision red, all for revenge over something that happened before I was born. Family debts passed through generations thereon." Obsidian's smile widened. "Speaking of which, how is little Winter? I heard she had a terrible fever." "Did she survive?" He knew. Of course he knew. "She spoke," I said. "Told me everything. How you drained Evangeline. How you compelled Winter to silence. Compulsion breaks eventually. I knew the risk." He pulled out a knife. "Silver. Vampire killing silver. The real question's whether your new little consort will survive what comes next." "You're not touching her." "I already have." Obsidian gestured to the window. "My men collected her 5 minutes ago." My heart stopped. "Rose." I lunged for the window. Obsidian moved faster. The knife slashed across my ribs, silver burning like acid. I stumbled back, blood soaking through my shirt. "Did you really think I wouldn't prepare for this?" Obsidian laughed. Outside, I heard Rose scream. Real scream, not imagined. Something primal took over. I hit Obsidian like a battering ram. We crashed through furniture, paintings, centuries of family history. He was old, strong, skilled. But I was desperate, and desperation made me vicious. We fought through the study, into the hall, downstairs that cracked under vampire strength, trading blows that would have killed mortals. Silver knife versus raw fury. He cut me. I broke his arm. He snapped my collarbone. I shattered 3 of his ribs. Blood everywhere. Ours mixed. Family blood spilling for family sins. "You can't win," Obsidian gasped. "Even if you kill me, the council has evidence against you. You lose no matter what." "Then I'll lose fighting." I grabbed the knife, wrenched it from his hand. Silver burned my palm to bone. Didn't care. Drove it toward his heart. He twisted. Knife buried in his shoulder instead. He screamed, stumbled back, and Winter appeared behind him. My 6-year-old daughter, small and pale in her nightgown, eyes glowing with ghost sight that let her see the dead. "Mama says hello," she whispered. Obsidian turned, and Evangeline was there. Not really, not physically, but Winter's gift made her visible, made her real enough. My dead wife, beautiful and terrible, eyes full of righteous fury. She reached out with translucent hands, touched Obsidian's face, and whatever she showed him made him scream like a damn thing. I didn't waste the opportunity. Grabbed him, snapped his neck. Not enough to kill a vampire, but enough to stun. Then I dragged him to the window, threw him through glass and frame and wood, sent him tumbling into snow and darkness. "Run to the council," I shouted after him. "Tell them what happened. Tell them I'm coming." I turned to Winter. What are you doing here? You were supposed to stay home. Rose needed help. My daughter pointed to the garden. She's down there with bad men. Mama's ghost showed me the way. I ran, found Rose surrounded by 3 of Obsidian's guards. She was fighting. God help me, she was fighting with a knife she must have stolen in fury that rivaled my own. But she was mortal, fragile, already bleeding from a dozen cuts. I hit the guards like an avalanche, ripped the first one's throat out, broke the second one's spine. The third tried to run. Winter's ghost sight summoned something that made him collapse screaming. Then it was just us. Me and Rose and Winter in a blood-soaked garden under starless sky. Rose collapsed into my arms. Theron, God, I thought, I know, I'm here, you're safe. Winter saved me. She showed up with ghosts and... Rose laughed hysterically. Your daughter is terrifying. She takes after her father. Winter held up something she'd grabbed during the chaos. A ledger, black leather, gold clasp, Obsidian's real records. Every crime, every theft, every murder, all documented in his meticulous handwriting. Mama's ghost told me where to find it, Winter said proudly, while you were fighting. I stared at my daughter, this child who had been silent for 4 years, who now commanded spirits and retrieved evidence and looked at carnage without flinching. You're incredible, I said. I know. She handed me the ledger. Now let's go show the council what Uncle really is. We rode back to Shadowmere through the dark, broken, bleeding, triumphant. And when dawn came, we would finish this. Dawn broke over Shadowmere like a blade. We rode through gates that had stood for 3 centuries past guards who stared at our blood-soaked clothes and battered bodies, with expressions caught between horror and awe. I held Rose in front of me on the saddle, her back against my chest, her breathing shallow but steady. Winter sat behind us, small arms wrapped around my waist, the stolen ledger clutched against her nightgown like a talisman. We looked like survivors of a war, which in a way we were. Minerva met us at the castle steps. One look at our faces and she was moving shouting orders to servants, calling for Father Cornelius, organizing chaos into action with the efficiency of a battlefield commander. Your Majesty, her voice cracked on the title. Sweet mercy, what happened? Obsidian. I dismounted carefully, lifting Rose down with hands that trembled from exhaustion more than injury. We have what we need. But the council meets in 3 hours. We need to be ready. 3 hours, Minerva looked at the sky. Full dawn now. Council sessions traditionally began at noon. That's not nearly enough time to... It has to be. Rose swayed on her feet. I caught her before she fell. We present the ledger today or Obsidian disappears. She was right. We had wounded him, humiliated him, stolen his most damning evidence. But Obsidian had survived 2.5 centuries through cunning and ruthlessness. Give him time to regroup, and he would find a way to turn even this disaster to his advantage. Father Cornelius arrived with medical supplies and the kind of calm that only came from decades of tending vampire violence. He examined our wounds with practiced efficiency, bandaged Rose's cuts, splinted my broken ribs, checked Winter for trauma beyond the physical. She's holding up remarkably well, he murmured, watching my daughter organize the ledger pages into categories on the kitchen table. Considering what she witnessed tonight, she's stronger than any of us. I touched Winter's hair as I passed. She looked up and smiled. Small gesture, monumental meaning. She gets that from her mother. Both mothers, I suspect. I glanced at Rose. She was helping Cassandra sort evidence, explaining legal procedures with patience that belied her exhaustion. Felix sat nearby reading relevant sections of covenant law aloud. My family, fractured and strange and held together by a woman who had been with us barely a month, a woman I was falling in love with. The realization should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like waking up. We need to gather witnesses, Rose said, looking up from her work. Everyone Obsidian has heard. If we're going to do this, we do it right. We make the evidence so overwhelming the council has no choice but to act. That will take days we don't have. Then we work fast. She stood wincing as stitches pulled. Minerva, you know everyone in Shadowmere. Who can we trust? Who will stand with us? The old housekeeper considered. Martha Brennan, Lord Cassian, the Whitmore family, the Sterlings. Get them here. My voice carried command I hadn't used in years. Send riders. Use my seal. Tell them the king summons them for testimony. Tell them this ends today. Minerva nodded and disappeared to arrange messengers. Rose turned to me and Emmett. What about him? He'll be at the trial with his federal marshal, claiming jurisdiction over me. She touched her throat where bruises had finally faded. We need to neutralize that threat or everything falls apart. She was right. Again. The covenant required a queen of unblemished character. Emmett's weren't false though it was cast doubt on Rose's character. And doubt was all Obsidian needed to turn the council against us. There's one solution, I said quietly. Marriage. Rose met my eyes. Real marriage. If I'm your legal queen consort, federal warrants don't apply. Vampire law supersedes mortal law in Shadowmere territory. Yes, that's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. I moved closer, close enough to see exhaustion bruising the skin under her eyes, close enough to smell blood and smoke and the faint lavender she used in her hair. Temporary. Rose's breath caught. Theron, I'm not asking you to marry me because of Emmett. I'm asking because somewhere between finding you half frozen in the snow and watching you bleed yourself to save my daughter, I forgot this was supposed to be pretend. I took her hands. They were small and scarred and capable of terrible gentleness. I'm asking because I love you, Rosalind Hartwell, and I want you to be my queen. Not on paper, not for politics, for real. Silence. The kitchen around us faded to background noise. Children working, servants moving, the ordinary chaos of preparing for battle. All of it distant compared to the woman in front of me. Say something, I whispered. Rose laughed, soft and broken and beautiful. You propose at the strangest time. I'm 247 years old. I've had practice being strange. We've known each other a month. I've lived lifetimes in that month. I'm wanted for crimes I didn't commit. So am I if Obsidian has his way. I can't give you more children. The doctors said. She stopped, swallowed. Virgil made sure of that. The confession landed like a blow. I had wondered why she never mentioned children of her own, why she spoke of her marriage with such careful emptiness. Now I knew. Virgil Creed had damaged her in ways that went beyond bruises and broken bones. I have 3 children, I said gently, who adore you, who need you, who would be devastated if you left. That's enough. More than enough. Your counsel can accept it or challenge me. I'm done letting fear of loss control my decisions. I pulled her closer. You walked through a blizzard to get here. You saved my daughter's life. You stood beside me against my uncle and your abuser. If that's not the definition of a queen, I don't know what is. Tears tracked down Rose's cheeks. I'm terrified. Of what? That this is real, that I'm allowed to have this, that it won't be taken away the moment I let myself believe. I understood that fear, had lived with it for 4 years. The fear that loving meant losing, that opening your heart meant giving the world ammunition to destroy you. I can't promise nothing will ever hurt us, I said. I can't promise we'll live forever without pain or loss or grief, but I can promise that whatever comes, we face it together. No more hiding, no more surviving when we should be living. Rose looked at me for a long moment, then she kissed me, soft and fierce and tasting of salt tears and something that felt dangerously like hope. When we broke apart, she was smiling through the crying. Yes, she whispered, I'll marry you today, right now, before I lose my nerve. You've never lost your nerve in your life. Then before you come to your senses and realize you could do better. Impossible. I kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth that curved when she was trying not to smile. You're already the best thing that's ever happened to me. Winter appeared beside us holding 2 rings she'd apparently been hiding in her nightgown pocket. Mama's rings, she said quietly. She told me to keep them. For when Father found someone new, someone who would love us even though we're strange and broken and half vampire. The rings gleamed in morning light, simple gold bands, nothing fancy, everything meaningful. Your mother, my voice cracked. Evangeline knew. Ghosts know things. Winter pressed the rings into Rose's hand. Mama says you're perfect, and that she's happy Father found someone who fights as dirty as she did. Rose laughed and cried and pulled Winter into a hug that encompassed both of us. My family, broken and strange and more real than anything I'd known in years. We should get married before the council session. Rose said practical, even in the middle of an emotional moment. Make it legal before Emmett can object. Agreed. I looked at Father Cornelius. Can you perform a covenant ceremony in the next hour? The priest smiled. For you, your majesty, I can perform one in the next 20 minutes. We married in the castle chapel. No time for elaborate preparation. No grand ceremony with hundreds of witnesses. Just us and the children and Minerva and a handful of servants who had watched me grieve for 4 years and now watched me choose life again. Rose wore the same gray dress from earlier bloodstains, scrubbed out but still visible in certain light. I wore my council robes, formal black, that made me look every inch the Vampire King. We looked like warriors getting married between battles, which again was accurate. Father Cornelius stood before the altar with his prayer book and his half-vampire wisdom, and the kind of smile that suggested he'd been waiting for this moment since Rose first arrived. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we are gathered in the sight of gods and witnesses to join Theron Nightshade and Rosalind Hartwell in the sacred covenant of marriage." The words were old, adon, traditional, spoken over countless vampire mortal unions throughout centuries, but they felt new in my mouth. "Theron Nightshade," Father Cornelius turned to me. "Do you take this woman as your queen, your consort, your partner in all things mortal and immortal? Do you swear to protect her, honor her, and love her until final death claims you both?" "I do." The words came easier than breathing. "With everything I am." "Rosalind Hartwell," he turned to her, "do you take this man as your king, your husband, your partner in all things mortal and immortal? Do you swear to stand beside him, challenge him, and love him until final death claims you both?" Rose's voice was steady, strong. "I do, with everything I have." "Then by the power vested in me by covenant law and divine grace, I pronounce you wed." Father Cornelius pulled out a ceremonial dagger, silver, etched with runes older than Shadowmere itself. "The blood binding if you're willing." The traditional vampire wedding included blood sharing, a literal mingling of mortal and immortal. It wouldn't turn Rose, her null blood prevented that, but it would create a bond deeper than mere legal contract. It was also optional. I looked at Rose, gave her the choice. She held out her hand without hesitation. Father Cornelius made a small cut across her palm, then mine. We pressed them together, blood to blood warmth, to cold mortal, to immortal. The bond snapped into place like a string pulled taut. I felt her, not just physically, but deeper. Her heartbeat, her breath, the fierce determination that kept her standing despite exhaustion, the love that she was still afraid to name, but felt nonetheless. "You may kiss your bride," Father Cornelius said with barely concealed amusement. I didn't need to be told twice. This kiss was different from the desperate ones we'd shared before. This was promise, commitment, the kind of kiss that said forever and meant it. When we broke apart, Winter was crying happily. Felix was grinning. Cassandra was trying to look unaffected and failing miserably. "Welcome to the family, Rose," my eldest daughter said quietly. "Really welcome. Not just staying in the spare room welcome." Rose pulled her into a hug. "Thank you for letting me in." "You broke in. We just stopped trying to kick you out." They laughed. And something that had been broken in my family for 4 years finally started healing. Minerva produced champagne from somewhere. We toasted to new beginnings and second chances, and the strange paths that led broken people to each other. Then the clock struck 11. 1 hour until the council session. 1 hour to organize testimony and evidence and witnesses who were still riding hard to reach Shadowmere in time. 1 hour to prepare for a battle that would determine the future of the kingdom. Rose squeezed my hand. "Ready. With you beside me always." We left the chapel as husband and wife, king and queen, partners in every way that mattered. And if the universe was kind, we'd live long enough to enjoy it. The council chamber filled like a storm gathering. I had never seen it so crowded. The traditional 12 elders sat in their elevated seats, but below them packed every noble family I had summoned, every village elder who could make the journey, every person Obsidian had wronged over his 2 centuries of calculated cruelty. They stood in rows, silent, waiting. A jury of peers who had already decided the verdict and just needed the trial to make it official. Obsidian arrived fashionably late. He wore elegance like armor, despite the broken arm I'd given him and the silver burns that hadn't finished healing. His entourage included hired muscle and expensive lawyers and an air of superiority that suggested he still believed himself untouchable. Emmett Creed walked beside him. The sight of Rose's abuser standing with my uncle made something violent uncoil in my chest. They had coordinated this, planned it. 2 predators working together to destroy the people who threatened their power. Not anymore. Elder Mordecai called the session to order, then with 3 strikes of his gavel, the sound echoed off ancient stone like judgment itself. We reconvened to address accusations of fraud and embezzlement against Collector Obsidian Voss. His black eyes swept the crowd. "This is highly irregular. Council sessions are typically closed to—" "This is a matter of public interest," I interrupted. Every person in this room has been affected by the crimes we're here to discuss. They have a right to witness. You overstep Theron. I'm exercising my right as king to demand transparency, or has the council forgotten that we serve the people, not the other way around? Murmuring through the ranks of witnesses. Agreement, support, the kind of energy that came from years of silent suffering, finally given voice. Mordecai's mouth tightened. Very well, present your evidence. I stepped forward. Rose moved with me, a united front. She carried the ledger. I carried the weight of 4 years' worth of negligence that ended today. Members of the council, I began. My consort uncovered evidence of systematic fraud, tax inflation, falsified records, embezzlement on a scale that has devastated dozens of communities. The pattern pointed to one individual. Collector Obsidian Voss. Obsidian stood. We've been through this, nephew. I provided documentation. That you're a liar. Rose's voice cut through his like a blade. Every document you presented to this council was fabricated, but you made a mistake. She held up the ledger. Black leather, gold clasp, Obsidian's own handwriting. You documented your real crimes, every bribe, every theft, every murder, all recorded because you couldn't help yourself. You had to keep score. The color drained from Obsidian's face. That ledger is private property, he said. Obtained illegally. From your estate where you were holding my wife hostage, I said flatly. After you sent assassins to kill us. After you murdered Evangeline. Nothing about this is legal, Uncle. So let's stop pretending law matters to you and start discussing justice. Rose opened the ledger, read entries aloud, dates and amounts and names of nobles who had mysteriously lost their territories, villages that had been bled to bankruptcy, bribes paid to council members. That last one caused an uproar. 3 elders named in the ledger tried to flee. Guards blocked the doors. The crowd pressed closer, angry and demanding, and finally seeing the scope of Obsidian's corruption laid bare. This proves nothing, Obsidian snarled. Faked evidence. Then let's add eyewitness testimony. I gestured to the crowd. Lord Cassian, tell the council what happened. A vampire noble stepped forward, ancient, respected, furious. Obsidian Voss approached me 6 years ago with a loan offer. Generous terms, I accepted. 2 years later, he claimed I had defaulted. Showed documents proving debt I didn't owe. When I contested, he called in enforcers. They burned my manor, killed my servants, took everything. Lord Cassian's voice shook with barely contained rage. I've been living in exile ever since, waiting for someone to finally stand up to him. And you, Martha Brennan. Rose looked at the elderly woman standing near the front. Tell them about your husband. Martha's voice was steady despite tears. My husband Henry paid our debt to Obsidian in full. Got a receipt signed by Obsidian himself. Then 3 months later, Obsidian claimed we still owed. We couldn't fight it. Henry died of the stress. I lost everything. She held up a crumpled paper. But I kept the original receipt, proof that Obsidian collected a debt already paid. More testimonies followed, a dozen voices, a dozen stories, all painting the same picture of a predator who had spent decades preying on the vulnerable while the council looked the other way. Finally, I called Winter forward. My 6-year-old daughter walked to the center of the chamber with her head high and her rag doll clutched in one hand. She looked impossibly small in that vast space full of ancient vampires, immortal witnesses, and the weight of history. But she didn't flinch. Winter Nightshade, I said gently, tell the council what you saw the night your mother died. Winter's voice was clear, steady, the voice of a child who had carried silence for 4 years and was finally free. I saw Uncle Obsidian kill Mama. The chamber exploded, shouting, denials, Obsidian lunging forward before guards restrained him. Winter continued over the chaos. I was supposed to be sleeping, but I heard noises. I followed, and I saw him. He bit Mama, drank and drank until she stopped moving. Then he threw her away like garbage, like she didn't matter. The child is lying, Obsidian roared. She's been coached. She's been silent for 4 years, Father Cornelius interrupted. Compulsion planted during your feeding, making her unable to speak what she witnessed. I examined her myself. The magical signature matches your power, Obsidian. There's no denying it. I pulled out one final piece of evidence, Evangeline's journal, found in the study days ago, hidden in plain sight. My wife knew you were investigating something dangerous, I said to the council. Her last entries mention Obsidian asking about null blood, about Winter's ghost site, about powers that could threaten established bloodlines. I opened to the final page. Her last words were these: "O knows about the prophecy. He's going to kill me to prevent it. If you're reading this, I'm already dead. Don't let him win." Silence, the kind that preceded avalanches. Elder Mordecai looked at the evidence, at the ledger, at the crowd of witnesses, at Obsidian restrained by guards and radiating hatred. "Obsidian Voss," he said slowly, "you stand accused of regicide, embezzlement, fraud, assault, conspiracy. How do you answer?" For a moment, I thought Obsidian would maintain his facade, continue denying, play the political game he'd mastered over centuries. Instead, he laughed. "How do I answer?" He shook off the guards, straightened his coat, looked at me with eyes full of ancient hatred. "I answer that your father murdered mine over a mortal whore, that House Voss was robbed of its rightful inheritance, that every crime you accuse me of was justice for that original sin. My father's crimes aren't mine to answer for. No, but his legacy is yours to bear." Obsidian's mask finally cracked. "You want to know why I killed Evangeline? Because she was null blood. Because the prophecy said a null blood queen would end my bloodline's power. Because if I couldn't have the throne, I'd make damn sure you suffered for holding it. And the embezzlement, building a war chest, gathering allies, preparing for the day I could take everything from you the way it was taken from me." He looked at the council. "I regret nothing. I'd do it all again. The only thing I regret is not killing you when I had the chance." Confession. Complete. Unambiguous. Damning. Elder Mordecai's face hardened. "Obsidian Voss, you have confessed to regicide before witnesses. You have admitted to decades of fraud and corruption. You have shown no remorse. This council has no choice." The gavel struck 3 times. "You are found guilty on all charges. Sentence is death by sunlight, to be carried out at dawn tomorrow. Assets forfeit to the crown. Territories returned to rightful owners. May whatever gods you believe in have mercy on your soul. This council certainly won't." Guards moved in, silver chains, holy water, the implements used to restrain vampires who had lost all right to freedom. Obsidian didn't struggle, just smiled at me with something like satisfaction. "You think you've won," he said quietly, "but ruling is harder than deposing. You'll see, the crown will eat you alive, just like it ate your father. And when it does, I'll be waiting in whatever hell vampires go to." Laughing, they dragged him away. The crowd erupted in cheers. Justice delayed for years finally delivered. Nobles reclaiming their honor. Villages seeing their oppressor bound for execution. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. Rose's hand found mine, squeezed gently. "One more thing," she said quietly. "Right. Emmett." The man stood near the back of the chamber, federal marshal beside him, looking considerably less confident than when he'd arrived. "Emmett Creech," I called. "You came here with a warrant for my wife's arrest." "That's right." He tried to project authority, failed miserably. "Rosalind Hartwell is wanted for fraud in Philadelphia. I'm here to waste everyone's time." Rose stepped forward. "Those charges are based on forged documents, fabricated by you to frame me for your brother's crimes. You can't prove that." "Actually, I can." She produced papers from her pocket. "I kept copies of the real contracts, the ones without my signature, the ones that prove Virgil worked alone." She turned to the council. "I also have testimony from witnesses in Philadelphia who saw Emmett forging my name, who heard him bragging about framing me." Emmett's face went pale. "Those are the truth." Rose's voice hardened. "You beat me, strangled me, tried to destroy me because I was convenient scapegoat for your brother's failures. But I survived, and now you're going to answer for it." The federal marshal cleared his throat. "If the evidence is falsified, I can't execute the warrant." "Federal law has no jurisdiction here," I interrupted. "Shadowmere territory operates under covenant law. And under covenant law, Rosalind Hartwell is my queen. Attempting to arrest her is an act of aggression against the crown. You can't." "I can, I am. And if you set foot in my territory again, I will consider it an act of war." I looked at Emmett. "As for you, you have 1 hour to leave Shadowmere. After that, anyone who sees you has my permission to treat you as hostile. You're threatening a mortal citizen. I'm promising justice to an abuser who thought he could hide behind paperwork." I let my fangs descend. Let him see the monster underneath the king. 1 hour, Emmett. I suggest you use it wisely." He ran. The marshal followed, muttering about diplomatic incidents and jurisdictional nightmares. Rose sagged against me. "Is it over?" "Yes." Really over. Really, I kissed the top of her head. Obsidian faces execution. Your charges are dismissed. The kingdom's treasury will be restored. We won. She started laughing, then crying, then laughing again. We won, she repeated. We actually won. The crowd pressed close, congratulating, thanking, celebrating a victory that belonged to all of them. I held my wife and let them have their moment. We had earned it. That night, we prepared for the execution. Guards reinforced the courtyard post with silver chains. Father Cornelius blessed the space with prayers older than memory. The council gathered witnesses who would attest to justice served. Rose and I stood on the castle battlements as the sun set, watching preparations below. She leaned against me, exhausted but peaceful. You don't have to watch tomorrow, I said quietly. The execution. It will be difficult. I need to see it finished, need to know he can't come back. She looked up at me. We close this chapter together. Remember. I kissed her forehead, together. We returned to the castle as twilight deepened. Minerva had prepared a quiet dinner. The children were already asleep, exhausted from the day's events. Rose and I ate in comfortable silence, then retired to our chambers. Our chambers, not separate rooms, not a business arrangement. Husband and wife. The next morning came too quickly. Obsidian's execution began with the dawn. The ancient laws were clear. Regicide demanded death by sunlight, the cruelest end for a vampire. Slow burning that took hours. Agony measured in degrees of light. Rose insisted on attending. So we stood on the castle battlements as guards dragged Obsidian to the courtyard below. Silver chains held him to the post. Holy water had weakened him to the point where struggling was impossible. He looked small in that vast space, not like the monster who had terrorized a kingdom, just an old vampire who had let hatred consume him. Any last words? Elder Mordecai asked. A courtesy extended even to the condemned. Obsidian looked up at me, smiled. The crown will destroy you, nephew, just like it destroyed your father, just like it destroyed me. That's what happens to House Nightshade. We're cursed to hurt the people we love in pursuit of power. Then I'll break the curse, I said quietly. Good luck with that. The sun broke over the eastern mountains. First light touched his skin. Smoke rose, then flames, then screaming that echoed off stone walls and made even hardened vampires flinch. Rose turned away, buried her face in my coat. I'm glad he's dying, but I can't watch. I held her, watched for both of us, because someone had to witness. Someone had to remember that justice, even righteous justice, came with a cost. Obsidian Voss burned for 3 hours. When it was over, nothing remained but ash and chains. The vampire who had killed my wife, terrorized my daughter, and nearly destroyed my kingdom was gone. I should have felt relief. Instead, I just felt sad. For the man Obsidian could have been. For the century of hatred that had poisoned everything he touched. For the cycle of violence that had claimed my grandfather, my father, my uncle, and nearly claimed me. It's over, Rose whispered. Yes. What happens now? I looked at the crowd dispersing below. Nobles reclaiming territories. Villagers planning reconstruction. A kingdom beginning to heal. Now, I said, we rebuild. 6 months later, the gardens of Shadowmere bloomed for the first time in living memory. Rose had planted them in the spring. Night-blooming jasmine. Moonflowers. Shadow roses. Things that thrived in darkness and turned twilight into beauty. The castle that had felt like a tomb for 4 years now felt like a home. I found her there on a warm June evening, kneeling in the dirt with soil on her hands, laughing at something Winter had said. My youngest daughter sat beside her, chattering away about the ghosts in the garden. Happy ghosts, she insisted, the kind that made flowers grow. Cassandra was nearby with a book, actually reading instead of pretending to read while brooding. Felix chased butterflies with a net he'd made himself, naming each one after locomotives. My family, healed, whole, happy. Your Majesty, Rose looked up, shading her eyes against the setting sun. Shouldn't you be reviewing petitions or attending council meetings? I delegated. You can't delegate everything. Watch me. I settled beside her in the dirt, uncaring that my formal robes would be ruined. Besides, the Queen does all the real work anyway. She laughed. Smart man. The months since Obsidian's execution had been busy. Territories returned, taxes corrected, villages rebuilt with funds from the Crown Treasury. Rose had organized it all with ruthless efficiency while I handled the political side. We made a good team. Better than good. The council wants to talk about succession, I said. Already. You're mortal, I'm not. They're concerned about what happens when I stopped. Couldn't finish that sentence. Rose touched my face. When I die and leave you alone again. Yes. What did you tell them? That we'll address it when necessary, that I'm not interested in planning your death while you're sitting in my garden very much alive. I caught her hand, pressed a kiss to soil-stained knuckles, that I choose to live into the present instead of mourning a future that hasn't happened yet. Wise king. Desperate king. There's a difference, Wyman. She kissed me, soft and warm and tasting of earth and growing things. I love you, she said, in case I don't or not say it enough. You say it every day. I mean it more every day. Winter interrupted by presenting us with a flower crown she'd woven. For the queen, Mama's ghost helped. Rose accepted it with appropriate gravity, let Winter place it on her head, looked ridiculous and beautiful and completely content. Tell your mama thank you, she said. She says you're welcome, and that she approves of how you've redecorated her study. I had given Rose Evangeline's old study months ago. She had transformed it into something entirely her own. Books on accounting mixed with books on governance, maps of the kingdom marked with economic development plans, a small portrait of her mother on the desk, two women who had never met connected by the spaces they'd occupied. I miss her sometimes, I admitted. Evangeline, is that wrong? To miss my dead wife while married to you? No. Rose leaned against my shoulder. Love doesn't stop just because people die. Grief doesn't disappear because you find happiness again. They coexist. That's what makes us human. Or mostly human in your case? Mostly human, I smiled. I like that. Cassandra approached book tucked under her arm. Father, there's a messenger from the northern villages. They want to know if you're attending the harvest festival next month. Am I? You should. My daughter's expression softened. They rebuilt their granaries. Named the central one Evangeline Hall, in honor of Mother. I think she'd like that. My throat tightened. I think she would too. And they're naming the school Rose House. Cassandra looked at my wife. For the queen who fought for them when no one else would. Rose's eyes filled. That's too much. It's not enough, Cassandra knelt beside us. You saved Winter. You saved Father. You saved all of us. A school is the least we can give you. Felix bounded over breathless and excited. Can we go to the festival? Please, they're having contests, and the blacksmith said he'd show me how to forge horseshoes. Of course we're going. I looked at my family, gathered in a garden that shouldn't exist in vampire territory, laughing and planning and living. We'll go together. All of us. Winter climbed into Rose's lap. Will there be cake? Probably. Good. Mama's ghost likes cake. We sat there as the sun set and the moon rose and the night-blooming flowers opened their petals to darkness. The castle behind us glowed with warm light. Music drifted from the village below. Somewhere in the distance, someone was singing. Do you ever regret it? Rose asked quietly. Writing to that mail-order agency. Getting a bride through advertisement instead of romance. Every day. She stiffened. I regret, I continued, that I didn't write sooner, that you had to suffer years with Virgil before finding your way here, that you walked through a blizzard half dead to reach me. I regret all the pain it took to bring you to Shadowmere. But not the result. Never the result. I pulled her closer. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Rosalind Nightshade, and I will spend every remaining century I have proving it. She rested her head on my shoulder. You might get bored. I'm mortal, finite. You walked into a kingdom alone and unarmed and took down a 200-year conspiracy in 3 weeks. You bled yourself to save my daughter. You stood before the council and demanded justice. There is nothing ordinary about you. Sweet talker. Truthful husband. Winter yawned against Rose's chest. Felix had settled in the grass half asleep. Cassandra watched the moon rise with an expression of peace I hadn't seen in years. This was the future Obsidian said would destroy me. This quiet moment. This gentle happiness. This choice to love despite knowing love could hurt. But he was wrong. Love wasn't weakness. Love was walking through a blizzard for a stranger who needed you. Love was fighting monsters to protect children who weren't yours by blood, but became yours by choice. Love was building gardens in dark places and teaching flowers to bloom at night. Love was sitting in the dirt with your family and calling it perfect. Come on, I said, standing and lifting Winter into my arms. Let's get these children inside before they fall asleep in the roses. Rose gathered Felix. Cassandra collected gardening tools. We walked back to the castle together, a strange little family held together by choice and courage, and the stubborn refusal to let darkness win. Inside, Minerva had prepared dinner. The kitchen smelled of bread and roasted vegetables and the kind of warmth that turned houses into homes. We ate together, laughed together, told stories and made plans, and existed in the ordinary magic of being alive. And later, after the children were asleep and the castle was quiet, Rose and I stood at our bedroom window overlooking the kingdom. Lights twinkled in the valley below. Stars burned overhead. The world turned on indifferent to the small dramas of vampires and mortals and the impossible love that bound them. "Thank you," Rose said. "For what?" "For finding me in the snow, for giving me a chance. For loving me even though I came here broken." "You weren't broken." I turned her to face me. "You were surviving. There's a difference, and the fact that you survived everything life threw at you and still had room in your heart for 3 damaged children and 1 very foolish vampire king, that's not broken. That's extraordinary." She smiled. "We're both foolish then, greeted, and probably doomed. Almost certainly. But happy?" I kissed her, long and slow and full of promises I intended to keep. Deliriously happy. I had been 247 years old when Rose Hartwell walked into my life. I had killed 63 men in battle. I had ruled 10,000 souls through plague and famine and war. But I had never truly lived until the moment a bruised mail-order bride collapsed in the snow and taught me that the strongest thing you can do is keep going. Keep fighting. Keep loving. Keep choosing life even when death would be easier. This was the kingdom I had built. Not in blood or violence or ancient law, but in gardens and laughter and children sleeping safely in their beds. In a wife who challenged me and completed me and reminded me daily that strength came in many forms. In the radical act of choosing hope over despair. Light over darkness. Love over hate. The moon rose higher. The stars burned brighter. And in Shadowmere Castle, a family slept peacefully, safe, loved, home.